In this video, I'm going to finish setting up my development environment so that we can start layering the functionality for our bootstrapped SaaS using Cursor and Claude. If you don't know me, my name is Sean Boyce, and I've spent years building successful SaaS businesses. I'm building my next one in public with you to help you succeed by borrowing elements from my process. Subscribe if you don't want to miss a step along the way. Previously, we began the process of setting up our local development environment. That meant pushing the changes that we've made to the SaaS in Lovable up to GitHub so that we have a repo. Then we cloned that repo, pulled that down into our local development environment so that we can begin the process of wiring everything up, prioritizing our backlog, and layering in the functionality from there. And that's what we're going to finish wiring up today. The objective for today is to try to get the local server running, which matches at least the functionality that we can currently manage in Lovable. And if you've missed any step along the way as part of my Build in Public series for this SaaS product, I'll link to the playlist, which has all of the videos so that you can watch any of those that you'd like to catch up. So why are we doing this step now? Well, as I'm always saying, the most important thing, especially in this phase, is we need to continue to get validation, like early and often is what I'll say about that. But I had the key pieces that I need in order to start doing that. I've got my landing page, which is ready, and I've got a UI UX for version 1 well-designed that I can use to demo. Now that we've got those, need to go get as much feedback as we can. And I've mentioned a couple of strategies in order to do that as well too. Go back to the target market, the prospects that you've been having conversations with, where you found these problem solution kind of fit concepts, and get that validation with these resources. However, if that feedback continues to come back positive, as in it looks like you're on the right track, the next step in the process needs to be figuring out how we're going to bring this functionality to life. And that means managing all the technical work. That's why we're focusing on that now. So part of once we get all of this development environment elements wired up is to start prioritizing our backlog. So we're going to take what we have in the UI design, and we're going to break that down into modules and features so that we can prioritize how we're going to build everything to make the entire application functional to be able to officially launch V1. We're going to start with Cursor, and then I'm going to use other tools like GitHub and Claude occasionally in order to get everything wired up. So let's take a look. I've got Cursor set up here, and I'm going to walk you through how I customize it, and then everything we need to do in order to get our application running locally. So something that I've already adjusted here in my Cursor window, in the bottom, you can see a terminal window. So that is pretty straightforward and easy to access on a Mac. You just kind of go to terminal in the menu settings, and then you add that. It's integrated, which is nice. I find that to be pretty convenient. Then you can resize all these windows and stuff. Right now, it only has one set, but what I'll do is I'll often add multiple ones. So there, I just click this plus button in order to add another instance here. It basically just pulls up another instance of your terminal window. So if you want to run multiple things simultaneously within or integrated into Cursor, having different things running in different terminals, you can do so here, including Claude Code, which runs in the terminal, as well as Cursor has shipped a couple of things like OpenAI has Codex that runs in the terminal. So depending on what models you're using, you may be using the terminal for most of your development work. And if I'm using Claude Code, usually that's where I'm doing it. And I'll either do it in this terminal window or I'll just launch another and then have both of those windows up at the same time. The agent window on the right-hand side here is typically where I have that docked or set. You can resize it accordingly based on, how it is you want it to look or how much screen real estate you want to have. And you can also flip it back and forth to different sides so that it's docked on the left or the right or whatever. I usually keep it docked on the right. A couple things here to note is, and these are some of the reasons why I like and typically still prefer to use Cursor over Claude Code at the moment, but that I go back and forth on that. Just for this content, I'm going to focus on Cursor. It's got different modes here, which I find convenient. So one of the biggest challenges when we're coding with AI is making sure we're making good, efficient usage of our token, basically, or our capacity with AI in terms of whatever plan we're on. So I'm on a fixed plan, so I pay the same amount every month, which gives me a certain amount of capacity to do development work. And for the most part, I don't usually exceed those capacities, but it depends on how much work I'm doing. However, there's a couple things we can do in order to make more efficient use of the token capacity. One of them is switching back and forth between these modes. Agent mode is when we wanted to do something. And the other one I use the most frequently, plan is good, so is debug, is ask. So I might flip to ask if I want to ask questions about my code base or maybe something we want to do strategically or whatever. And these other modes either use significantly less or no token usage. It's really just you interacting with the Cursor agent. So I'm going to keep it in agent mode for now. And then the second thing I'm going to show you as well too is Cursor gives you the ability to specify which model you're using. And the reason why I say I'm kind of using Claude Code as part of this as well too is because I'm using Anthropic's most popular Claude Code model in that at the moment, as of January 2026, for a few days at least, Opus 4.5. Fantastic model, decent capacity on the plan that I'm on and all that kind of stuff. But usually I'm set to that one. And this is an area to pay close attention to because you don't want that flipping to something else unexpectedly. To me, that produces inconsistent results. I don't like changing models, and I'm usually focused on using the best available model at the moment. They sometimes will flip you to auto or recommend you use auto, and that will kind of go back and forth and choose for you to just keep it going. But I kind of see that as almost like using different developers with different levels of experience, knowing your code base as well as capabilities and seniority from a development perspective. So stick with the best models, make sure that's always set. Other stuff they've added here as well too is basically agent mode. So you can run multiple agents at the same time. And there's a drawer here where you can kind of slide that out and you can add different agents. You can have them running simultaneously, working on separate tasks. I haven't really taken full advantage of that yet. I tested it, but I don't really need it either in terms of the work that I'm doing. I'm still doing a lot of my stuff sequentially. I can occasionally do things in parallel, but I largely don't need to because this is so much faster than before. It's really not a bottleneck for me as of yet in terms of the technical work that I'm doing. Okay, the other thing I mentioned, and I usually use the shortcut for that, which if you're on a Mac, is just Command B. I could pull up my menu here and I could see what is currently in the directory. These are all the files that I worked with Lovable to create the landing page and the UI UX design for version 1 of the application. I will hide and unhide that based on which files I may want to take a look at in my browser window. And the one that I'm going to look at for now, you just do single click in Cursor, it'll pull up in view mode. Double click will usually bring you into edit mode, but I wanted to see package.json. So now this is node functionality, which is JavaScript backend kind of stuff, but we use both Node Package Manager and Node to run some of these JavaScript themed or based applications. Lovable uses Next.js, which is a component or related to React, which is using JavaScript for mostly like front end functionality kind of stuff, but gives you back end capabilities as well also. So Next has become quite a bit more popular. React is wildly popular. I still use that extensively. Next has become very popular because it can kind of give you a little bit of both. You get the React functionality, but you also get some server side benefits as well too. And some of the things that, for example, just using a React app, you don't benefit from as much are things like SEO because there's no server side rendering that puts your pages together and serves them up to clients and stuff like that as well too. So Next will help you with that. So you get some of that SEO boost as well too. So Lovables mainly use Next.js to build the application and React. My focus now is going to be on trying to get this application running locally as successfully and as fully functional, at least as it was with Lovable, which is mainly just interactive, but locally. And I'm going to do that myself manually, and then I'm going to work with the agent in order to make any adjustments necessary in order to make that go. The other stuff that we can do here as well too, and I'm going to rename one of my terminal windows. Oh, I deleted that one, so I'll add it back. Right click, you can rename it. And I'll just do something like Git. So I'll keep one of my terminal windows for my version control. And then I'll have, you'll have the full history and everything in every terminal window, but I'll separate that out and I'll just flip back and forth to that one as I need to make any changes in my version control. There's also a couple of Git commands that we can go through and stuff like that in order to make you more familiar with leveraging version control for tracking everything that you're doing with your project. The one I just issued is called Git status, and that tells me basically like what's going on with my repo in my branch. Do I have any changes that I need to track or commit? Whereas if I were to not do that, I might lose that history. So I use command Git status quite a bit, and I'll collapse my folder window here just so I can do a little bit more. Other one is Git branch, which will tell me basically like which branch I'm on for my version control. Every repo comes or Git instance comes with main as your typical your at least one of your branches will be called main. You can create branches off of that branch, and sometimes I do that depending on the complexity of my infrastructure. I may have like a dev branch or something like that, which is ahead of main, and then main will hold my production ready code and stuff like that. But we'll get into all those examples later as well too. I just want to kind of show you some of these commands. As we make changes, we'll do more of the Git stuff and then make sure that we're in a good spot to be able to push up our changes that we're making locally using Cursor when when we're continuing to build our project. So another thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename this one as my server. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to launch this application locally, see if I can get that Lovable functionality working. Um, other stuff to look for here in terms of, so we're going to use npm in order to run the application. And this script section tells us what's currently built out in here in terms of which scripts can we run and what do they do. So the dev one is typically what will launch our application locally. So that's the one that I'm going to fire up. I'm going to try to launch our server locally and see if we can get our application running. So now that we got everything set up in our Cursor IDE or integrated development environment, the two commands you typically need to run for a node project is you need to install all the dependencies, and you can see them here in this package.json, and then you need to run the script, which pulls from all of that information and tries to launch the application. So in order to install all your dependencies, you just run npm I, is short for npm install, and then it should install all these dependencies locally, which are in your package.json file. We're going to do some of this stuff manually, and we can do some of it in an automated way with the agent. And I'm likely to kind of walk you through different elements of both because I want you to know both the technical concepts as well as how to leverage the agent for doing these things as well too, right? I'm going to say this over and over again, but we're not really vibe coding. That is a whole other thing. We're doing context engineering. So we are doing engineering work. It's just we're doing it primarily with AI. But that doesn't mean that we skip out on understanding both the theory and the technical concepts, as well as how to do them manually. I'd prefer that you know all that stuff, at least the basics, and then you can go deeper in any concept that you want. That will help you figure out what's going on when the AI does something you don't want it to do or isn't working or whatever. I still want you to know what it's doing, even if it's doing most of the work for you. I think that's an important principle. Okay, so I installed it and it's given me some feedback. So it looks okay so far, just some warnings. Warnings aren't necessarily showstoppers. Errors typically are, so we would need to address those immediately. But right now it looks like we just have warnings. So because those packages have successfully been installed, now I'm going to try to run the server and see how it works, see how it goes. So you do npm run, and then you pick your script name. In this case, it's just dev, which you can see here in package.json. That should use Vite in order to try to run the application, see how it works. Other thing that Cursor can do now as well too, is basically launch a browser window right within the IDE. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's convenient. I'll have to admit or accept that fact. But typically what I'll do is I'll launch it in my browser session window and then manage things from there just like a client would. But Cursor can do it, which is cool. Okay, so I did npm run dev and it launched my application. It looks so far, this is our landing page just the way it looked in Lovable, except now it's running locally. So let's go ahead and launch this in a browser window as well too and see how that goes. All right, so in order to launch our server in our browser, there's a couple of shortcuts. You can just type this directly into a new browser window if you want as well too, but see how this becomes interactive here, and it even is showing it to you as part of the hover over. But if I just do command click, it will launch in a browser window separately itself, and then I can see how that looks. Open. And here we go. It opened in my other window. I'll drag it over here. Nice, looking good. Okay, so you can see it's got the localhost address and the port that's being served on, which is 8080. So that helps us get to our local server here. So now this is running and it's running on our local machine. So I'm just going to kind of browse down page here to make sure it's got most of what I was expecting. You can test some of the functionality as well too to see how well it's working. Because again, the objective for this step in the process is just to make sure that everything that was designed and built Lovable, we can replicate and emulate locally. Looks good. Now let's take a look at the demo account. All right, so I click the demo account. Looks good here. I see pretty much the functionality I'm expecting. Manage integrations. Cool, good stuff. All right, let's check reports as well while we're here. Looks good. Got my note, logging activity. Cool, my status is awesome. Okay, so from what I can tell here, everything is looking pretty good. So we have, I'm gonna switch back to Cursor. And I'm gonna close the browser tab that it has open here. So we have successfully designed and set up. We've taken our project from Lovable, we got it to GitHub, we pulled down the repo, we set up our development environment, and we have installed our dependencies and run our server. That's quite a bit. That's a mouthful. I say that out loud. Um, we haven't done a ton of custom work yet, but we've got our environment set up to be able to do that. And that's what the objective was for this content. So we've done that. Don't open that. Next, in terms of what we are going to be doing, is we're going to be interacting with the agent quite a bit as we probably do a phase of refactoring. As you know, I'm particular about how I design my stuff. And if you take a look at this folder menu here, most of all of our files are set up okay, but they're kind of just like off the root, and I want to clean that up a little bit. What I like to do typically is if we're going to have a proper backend, which in this build I believe we will, we're dealing with numbers, finances, all that kind of stuff. So JavaScript not necessarily the best about that. It can do it with Node and stuff like that, or even Next.js has got some API capabilities itself, which can kind of emulate backend functionality. But I want to have more power basically in order for us to be able to do things on the backend, which as a tech stack in general just kind of gives you that much more flexibility to do whatever you want with your tech. For that, I'm probably going to integrate or leverage Python. So build out a proper backend using Python, and then we'll have front end and back end. And what I usually do is I take the front end stuff and I have that in a directory, and then I take my back end stuff and I have that in another directory. That enables me to kind of split my project out if I want, especially if I'm going to be hosting both of those in different places, which I usually do as well too. It just kind of makes things a little bit more flexible and versatile. So that will be next in terms of what we're doing here. And then we're going to be interacting with our agent over here as part of that process. But just to show you for this session, now that we're all set up, I can ask any question that I want. So I can say something like, tell me about this code base. And I've done that using Opus 4.5, and I did it on ask mode. So this is what the interaction with the agent looks like when you're using Cursor. And this is on a completely brand new project, me asking questions, and I'm going to be interacting with it. It's going to track the history, so we can always go back for that kind of stuff and all kinds of things from there. And then one thing I'll show you while that's doing its thing is I'm going to collapse my folder menu again, and I'm just going to do a git status and show you like what has been changed or what hasn't been changed. There has been a modification to the lock file for our package.json, and we're going to go through all this kind of stuff as well also in terms of what we need to do related to tracking changes with version control and all of that as well also. And it looks like something stalled or bombed out with my request over here with the agent, so I'll try that again. If that's not working, I'll find out why, and then we'll go further from there. Okay, so it looks like it just failed for its first attempt. That happens from time to time. I'll keep you posted about all the finicky things with leveraging agents and AI for developing code and all that type of stuff. There's plenty to learn there, but don't get discouraged or frustrated if whatever you're trying to do doesn't work the first time. Sometimes we have to do it 2 or 3 times in order to get it work, but I promise you it is incredibly helpful and will speed the process up significantly. So all I've asked it is like, tell me about my tech stack, and you can see how quickly it's come back with all kinds of helpful information, which also helps educate us along the way. And that's where I use the ask functionality quite a bit as well. Also, you can use the agents to basically teach you things about your code base. Like, what are we doing? How are we doing it? Show me where we're doing it. How does this work? How does that work? That's one of the things I also like a lot about leveraging Cursor is I'm not just building my application, I'm also learning along the way. And Ask enables me to ask it pretty much anything about our code base or just strategy in general. I find that to be helpful, powerful capabilities as we're trying to take full advantage of developing with AI. One more thing I want to show you while we're here, which gives you an idea just how powerful this setup is and leveraging AI for development and all that kind of stuff, especially if you're a beginner or first-time founder or are not all that technical. You can work with the agent to learn just about anything in this process, and you can do most of it right here. Claude's super helpful as well too, and I often go back and forth between a browser window and Claude and the Cursor agent. But in the terminal window down here, I issued the command. I'll just clear this window and start that over again. I said git status. Tell me about the status of this branch and my version control, this repo, whatever. And it told me that a file has been modified, the package lock.json file. And over here, I found that in my browser window I can open that up. So here is my package lock JSON file. Now what I can do when I open the file, I just single click on it for view mode. You can see that these bars on the left-hand side. These bars on the left-hand side are indicating for you basically like what's changing with this file. And that's why it came up in the get status window. You can also hover here and it'll give you more information about what's going on there. So the green is lines that it's added, and there's other sections here as well too, in terms of things that it's modified. So color coded, updates, additions, whatever. And you can see, a little kind of a indicator over here as well too to tell you like what's going on. But let's say you don't know anything at this step in the process, just for the sake of testing the AI and seeing what it can potentially help us with. You can say, I can ask whatever question I want here, which I find to be really cool. I could say, I did a git status command and it tells me my package. It also does autocomplete, which is super helpful. So I started typing package and it automatically knew what it was I was going to type. So I just did tab to autocomplete it. I did that git status command. It tells me that that file has been modified. I can ask a question of it. So I could say, what has been modified in that file and why? I could even start before that and I could say, what is this file for? And then I could say, what has been modified in that file and why? Also, should I commit the changes to this file or not? Basically, like in parentheses, to my GitHub repo. And let's see what it says. I just kind of want to demonstrate for you what you can use AI agents for in terms of learning about really anything when it comes to software development. I find them to be crazy helpful in these ways. And, there really isn't anything you can't ask it. You want to verify the information it's giving you from time to time to make sure that that's accurate. But I've often found that to be pretty accurate, especially with how capable the models are today. So here you go. We got a bunch of context. Let's take a look. I'm going to make the window a little bigger. All right, let's see what it said. Up, that's the tech stack. And then next question down below. So what is a package lock JSON file? Automatically generated by NPM and serves several purposes. Locks exact dependency versions. Makes sense. So the idea there is we want to nail down which dependencies we are using as we're building our app so that if someone else were to try to run it on our team or, we're pushing the changes to our hosting environment or whatever and it's running, we're going to make sure it runs the right versions of all dependencies in order to maintain consistency with the experience. Because if, one version changes or whatever, it might run or operate differently. Records the entire dependency tree, ensures reproducible builds. So that's basically what I just described, but how to describe it technically. What's changed? So I'll check that. And you can also see the commands that it's running in order to figure that out itself. And you can learn about these commands as well too. So it did a git diff of the file, and then the pipe to head dash 100 is give me the first or the top 100 lines from the output of that command. You can see, what it gets and gets back or doesn't get back. It showed that dependencies were added and then specifically matches, which tells you which ones. So you can go in there and you can see which ones have been changed. Added to package. These were added to package.json. And then it says which lines it's visible there. And then it says the question I had as well for it too was, should I commit these changes? Yes, you should commit it. Here's why. It ensures consistency. It's the NPM best practice. Changes are legitimate, all the way to and through. And it even gave me the instructions of how to commit it myself. So let's walk through that step now, commit those changes to wrap up this content. Okay, so let's try to commit those changes. So we work with our agent. We made the window bigger so we could review that content. So I'm going to shrink that down a little bit, give me some more screen real estate. And I'm going to hide my folder, my directory browsing window as well too, because I don't necessarily need that either. Again, I'm here in my Git terminal instance. I did my status. The commands that I typically issue and in the order in order to commit changes using Git from the command line. And Cursor also has the ability to do this via the GUI. I'll show you that in future content as well too, if that's how you prefer to manage it. But I'm old school a little bit here, and this is the way we did it before AI, so I kind of still do it the same way. So git add, and then I usually do dot. So I'll do git add dot, and that stages your changes to be committed. And you'll see how that status will change in a moment. So basically this is saying like add everything that's been changed with the exception of my git ignore file. And that's a file that's also in that menu and tells basically your version control what not to commit, because there's plenty of things we don't want to commit to version control, like key API keys and things like that as well too, because that may eventually be available, across the web, and that stuff is private, and we'll talk about that as well too. But from a security perspective, we don't want to do that oftentimes. So we have a git ignore file. Just pull it up here so you can see it. Comes with, as you establish or initialize a Git repo, it will add a number of things here that by default it typically won't commit, and then you can add to this as you have additional sensitive stuff to make sure that it ignores as well too. And if it's added in here, when you do a git status, it won't show up in there, or it will show up and say that these are untracked, and that's by design because based on what you've added to your git ignore file. Okay, so I'm going to stage my changes. So let's do that. I did that, and I'll do another git status so you can see the difference. So typically when you have uncommitted changes and then you've staged them, it'll flip the color as well too, and it's reflected. So it's got the file in there, but that's changed because those changes are now committed is what it's called. But now I need to actually, or sorry, stage, not committed. Those changes have been staged. So now we need to commit them, and that's git commit. And when you're committing changes, you typically always want to add a message, which will tell future you or whoever else manages this code base with you or after you or whatever, what this change was all about. And these are all the basics for more advanced stuff we're going to do later. But this is the process basically. And I want to show you each step of the way because the idea here is to build in public, right? But for my more advanced folks out there, if this is too basic for you, basically just skip ahead to the future content. I just want to make sure everyone is keeping up with this. So git commit. So I've installed dependencies and successfully run the server locally. Commit those changes. All I got to do is enter there. Now the commit has the changes have been committed, but so it's now if I do a git status, it says I have one commit, but I need to do git push in order for that to be linked to my repo on GitHub. And I'll show you that in the window as well too. So here is my GitHub repo. This is where our version control is going to be managed outside of our local system. One of the reasons obviously that we do this is, I lose my laptop or I have hardware failure or whatever. I've got everything running locally here, but if I have one of those mechanical issues or physical issues or whatever, I still have all of my source code saved in a last known good state. And that's typically when we're committing things. So in here, I can see here are the commits. So if I go to the commit section for the repo, you can see the history again of what's been committed. And all of this has mostly been done by Lovable. Now, the reason why we don't see the commit message or the commit that I just staged or whatever queued up is because I haven't pushed it yet. So we need to push that to GitHub in order for it to show up there. And that's what I'm going to try to do next. So I just enter the command, literally git push. Sometimes for the first time, you need to tell it more about the respective locations where it's coming from and going to. If you do, oftentimes it will tell you that. Okay, so following along with the messages here, basically what it's saying is somehow our local copy and our GitHub repo have gotten out of sync. So, but a lot of times it will tell you essentially kind of like what to do in order to rectify those issues. So what I'm going to try to do here is do a git pull, and that's going to attempt to sync my remote repo, remote in this case is GitHub, with my local. This is actually perfect. I've run into an issue while I'm trying to demo for you, but it's early in the process, which is kind of an opportunity I was hoping for. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways to try to sort through this. Now, there are tricky, finicky things to managing version control, but for the most part, it's very stable. You just kind of have to learn your basic commands and then how to manage it. But something's up with me trying to push from my local branch to my remote repo. And it's telling me the things we need to do and change because like somehow the branches diverged or whatever. But what I will sometimes do in this instance myself is either work with Claude to try to like figure it out or what the best way would be to solve the problem or work with the agent. So I'm going to work with the agent first, and I'm going to ask it questions. I'm going to provide it some of this context and history about what it is I'm trying to do. So I could just kind of take these messages right here, dump this over here and say, I'm trying to commit changes, but running into some issues. What's the problem? How did, well, what's the problem and how do we fix it? I'd also like to know how we got into this. We got into this situation to begin with. I'm just like, I'm geeking out about how cool it is to be able to do this with an AI agent. Being a developer and software engineer back in the day when I would run out of these problems, we would be Stack Overflowing and Googling or whatever. And we'd try to come up with the most obscure random version control Git commands. And it would take hours upon hours upon hours. And now we get just like, we've basically got like a helpful, incredibly knowledgeable agent available at all times. And it's really neat. So I'm going to paste that in there. And you see like what I've done is I've taken the terminal window output. So it has the history. Most of the time it can pull it itself as well too if you just tell it where to get it. But a lot of times I'll just kind of copy it into my message window with the context provided and my question in order to make sure that it has everything it needs to best kind of like help me working through whatever problem it is we're trying to solve. So let's see if we can't get the agent to kind of help us with what's wrong here. So it talks about the branches have diverged. That makes sense. And it's already walking through solutions for me as well. Divergent branches, your local main and the remote origin main have each moved forward independently. Git doesn't know how you want to combine them. Okay, I understand. Someone else's changes, which is more, oh, okay. So we don't have the full history that is on the remote branch. Yep, so there was a commit basically. This is what I thought was likely going on. I didn't dive into it yet myself, but I can do so to verify. But change happened via Lovable since we started making changes on our version of it. And basically, this is the whole purpose of version control. It's intended to help you make sure that you keep not just the right copy of all of your files in one good known location and in a good state, but also its history. So if it manages conflicts, a lot of times this will be referred to kind of as a merge conflict. Like if two people modify the same file at the same time and they're both trying to commit it, Git will keep track of those changes and say, hey, you're trying to change it in this way, you're trying to change it in that way. Like, what's the deal? Which one do we keep kind of thing? And it's giving me some options to fix it. It also makes recommendations in terms of which one to fix. And you can usually make changes with version control in order to maintain history or overwrite history or whatever it is you want to do. And again, you can keep going deeper down this rabbit hole. So like as you have questions about these options, keep doing that so you learn about this process as well too. Rebase is another, so git pull will pull the changes down from your remote branch to your local branch. And then rebase helps you with updating the history as well also. So we got two options. Option one, do a git rebase, pull rebase. This replays your commit on top of the remote changes, resulting in a linear history, which I like. So we'll have the full history and then our commit. We could do a merge, creates a merge commit, combining both branches. After either option, then you can push. That's the thought process here. Cool. To avoid this, opt in the future, you can set a default. Oh, that's cool. So we can set a default strategy for when we run into these issues in the future. All right, so I'm just going to try to do the git pull rebase. And so I'm doing this in ask mode. If I was doing this in agent mode, basically I could just tell the agent to fix it. The reason why I don't like that and I'm demoing this functionality is because I would prefer, especially if you're less technical or new to some of these things, you work with the agent manually so that you can learn these concepts as well too. Because we don't just want to leverage the AI to straight up do everything for us all the time. I think it's by far significantly better if we're learning alongside the agent as well too. You should know what it's doing and what it's not doing because you're going to need to make strategic decisions along the way that in terms of telling the AI potentially like what to do, and you're going to want to know what was done in those instances as well also. So let's try the rebase and see how that goes. To be fair, Git on the command line was telling us that as well too. I'll just mention that. So we'll try the git pull with the rebase. Successfully rebased and updated the refs heads main. So I'll do another git status. Looks good now. Now let's see if the push works. Okay, that's what a successful push should look like. So after we rebased to solve the problem, we were able to push those changes. Let's confirm on the GitHub side. All right, here's GitHub. As I mentioned before, this was the history before that. Changes. Let's refresh to see if we got the new ones in here. And there we go. Now we have this is the commit that you guys saw me and the message that you saw me add locally. So now we're all wired up. So if I come back here, now GitHub is the current version that my local has. There's no more conflicts. We can continue to make changes whenever we like to whatever, track them in this way, push up those changes, and now we're in a good spot. So we've got our server running locally. We've got our version control wired up and working. Now we can break down our backlog into priorities, start development work, keep track of those changes, and get moving on the technical stuff. Okay, so that's it for this video. We did quite a bit. I know this one was a little bit longer, so I appreciate you sticking in there with me, but I wanted to cover the basics and show you basically every step along the way. That's basically the point of building in public, right? So, and things don't always go according to plan. As you saw in this video, they clearly did not. And I want to show you all of that also. Not just what can and often will go wrong, because if you're building something in a custom way, that's going to happen, but how to get out of it as well also. And didn't just, go offline, try to figure it out, whatever. I showed you guys the full thing in terms of every step I did along the way in leveraging the agent and doing that in a more manual way. Is then I used ask mode to kind of help me diagnose the problem and try some fixes. And the fix that it recommended, I was both okay with. I learned more about along the way, implemented, and it worked. So that's basically not just how to get set up with Cursor from everything that we've done thus far locally, how to wire it up to our version control, and how to use the agent and the AI capabilities, kind of solve problems along the way and learn more yourself as well too. So now that all that's done, there's a couple priorities next. I'm going to refactor to a certain extent because I want to, as I mentioned, I want to redesign kind of file structure for my application and in particular the code base to make that a little bit easier and more well organized. And then we're going to break down our list of priorities in terms of the technical work as we build up our backlog for the modules and features that we want to build. So also, as I've been doing it every step along the way in this build in public series, I am templatizing everything that I'm doing along the way to help you with your project. So if you want to gain access to any of those free resources, check the link in the description below and subscribe to not miss a step in the process. Thanks, guys.